So we are live on the weekly live stream, the event of the week from the Age Diversity Forum. And I'm here with a friend and colleague of the Age Diversity Forum, Tony Williams. Tony, hi. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
And thank you for being our guest this week. Just to reiterate, why we do this, why we run in these live streams, and we absolutely feel it's right to amplify the message for age diversity. We're doing that through a range of different media approaches this year under a new campaign hashtag of making a noise. We absolutely want to make a noise for age diversity and to raise the profile of the age agenda as part of the whole diversity and inclusion challenge. And part of that is this way of discussion, talk about topical events and articles that we see across global journalism, whether that's from the corporate side or from the retail side. And just this week, Tony, you made me aware of a report that one of the big four, I think they're one of the big four, or certainly maybe one of the big four.
They'd be very upset if you said they weren't.
But Deloitte's have produced a report all about the employee experience. And Tony, I think you have access to this because of an alumni relationship that you have with Deloitte's. And I should just quickly say, Tony and I first met when Tony was at Barclays and had some responsibilities for the Generations program at Barclays. And since leaving, really happy that we've maintained a conversation. And Tony's been a great advocate and provider of some really interesting articles for us. And you'll be able to see those, or you can see those now via the Age Diversity Forum website. So I see Tony as a great thinker with interesting insight into the challenge of age diversity and everything from boiled frogs to something we're talking about today, as I say, the employee experience. And it dovetailed very nicely because I think I was telling Tony just before we went on air that I think within a couple of hours I was forwarded an article by an ex-City colleague of mine, Roy, at Pierpoint, who sent me an article that had been written for a global financial careers service site that talked about a certain situation where some more experienced, more mature employees had been let go from a particular organization, Credit Suisse this was, only to find that they needed that experience and that know-how back in the workplace. So Credit Suisse reached out to them to bring them back in, basically. So having made a judgment that that experience maybe wasn't quite what they were looking for or what was necessary at the time, I think quite quickly found that experience was really valuable to the organization. And in the article, it's described as a false economy in certain ways, in terms of making, I guess, some judgments, organizations making judgments and decisions when they're making those tough decisions about reviews of employment, let's call it that. Sometimes maybe there's a bit more consideration required about what experience and skills are available to that organization already and looking forward to what their business needs for the future. Maybe it's caused them to reflect, let's put it that way. So
it's interesting. It's a few years ago now, but and I'm sure things have changed because of the pandemic, but Boeing in the US sort of took the opposite view with their aeronautical engineers, because they could see the whole sort of group of very experienced aeronautical engineers, baby boomers, like me. They were leaving the organisation, and we were really struggling to actually replace them. Not just from their own internal case, but just marketplace. They just weren't there. So as a result of that, they did a lot of work around retention programs for that group of senior aeronautical engineers, to keep them in the organisation for longer, and to do more, if you like, knowledge transfer, while Boeing tried to rebuild the next generation of aeronautical engineers. And they were offering flexible working patterns, more training, all sorts of things to keep them in the organisation, because they just realised how exposed they were. Which I suppose, I mean, now I'm sure that things have changed quite a bit, because the demand for commercial aircraft fallen through the floor. So I don't quite know what the strategy is now in terms.
I think you're right, Tony. The pandemic has certainly added to the challenge, I guess, of the climate question as well, in terms of the whole aviation industry. But just I'm aware of not a dissimilar situation with Airbus, and in the UK, where they were utilising senior designers and individuals with great experience, and transferring that actually by seconding senior people out to local universities and working with students to showcase basically how to apply academia. So it's basically a career path view of, if you do this sort of engineering type course, where can you apply that and how can you apply that? Well, how about the aviation industry? So another way of transferring knowledge, but in a very practical sense.
I like that.
To almost give a bit of career advice at the same time. So as well as helping with project development and work within the syllabus, it also potentially created an opportunity for a student to think, oh, that's a career path that maybe I hadn't considered. So maybe they would now, and so that type of, I think what needs to happen, and it maybe sounds like where it that situation bridged with the situation you were just describing, Tony, is some element of, as you say, that retention of skills and experience within the workforce. And how do you do that? Do you do that through mentoring, through reverse mentoring as well? So you get younger people working with older people in terms of challenging and sharing. And again, I think the whole multi-generational approach is so important now, as within an employment environment, we can have 2, 3, 4, 5 potentially different generations of people, and by sharing knowledge and know-how that sparks innovation. And I thought it was quite interesting in the Deloitte's report, Tony, something that sort of echoes a lot of discussion we've had in recent weeks on our live stream, again about the multi-generational approach, and how younger people can feel adversely affected, or are adversely affected, or can feel adversely affected by age. And I think there was some statistics, some data within the report that commented on what employees felt about their organisation, in terms of, do they feel pride for their organisation? Do they feel that there's a sense of purpose, that the organisation has some core values that they adhere to and want to present to not only their own workforce, but maybe externally as well? And also, I thought it was really quite interesting. It was described in various ways. psychologically safe, I think was one of the terms.
Safety, yes.
A freedom of speech almost, freedom to speak within an organization without feeling that maybe, maybe one didn't have a voice, or maybe worse than that, you would feel maybe at a disadvantage if you sort of spoke up about something. So I don't know whether you recognise that as well, Tony. And
I did, and there's actually some very good examples of that particular challenge. You don't have to go. In fact, interestingly, if you go back to aviation, and you go back to, I would guess, the 70s, maybe the early 80s, and very sadly, there were quite a lot of quite nasty, air accidents during that period of time, and quite a lot of people lost their lives, which was dreadful. But the research that they did on those events identified a particular culture in the cockpit culture, and cockpit culture was very much about the captain, who obviously tend to be the oldest of the crew generally, was I guess the word is unassailable. The captain could do no wrong. You could not challenge the captain. You could not call them out to say that they were going to make an error. And what's happened in aviation over the past 40 years has been an absolutely massive sea change in culture. And I think, what do they call it? Talk to power. There's an expression for it, isn't there? And that has changed fundamentally now. And the other example of that is actually in the health service. And again, in the operating theatre, the senior surgeon, again, used to be like the captain in the cockpit. Nobody could challenge the surgeon. The surgeon was an all-knowing, godlike person. And as a consequence of that, people didn't learn. Mistakes weren't picked up. Mistakes weren't called out. And again, in that arena over the past 30, 40 years, that culture has actually changed. So now, during an operation, anybody has the right to put their hand up and say, "Stop. There's something not right here." They work as a team. Which is, and the reason I mention it, because there is an age dimension to it, which is this thing of the most senior person is the all-knowing person, but that's not true. And there's a two-way street. It's a bit like reverse mentoring, as you mentioned, which is, there are times when actually people with less knowledge see more because they don't see it through a particular set of experience or eyes. So don't discount it.
Absolutely, and I guess in a more sort of clandestine, that's the wrong word, but sort of the whole whistleblower type process, if you like, again, for want of a better term, I think there's more encouragement, isn't there, to call foul if you see it or feel it, and
there are, I'm sure there are still organisations out there where people daren't call anybody out or daren't challenge power because it potentially puts their job or their career at risk. And I'm sure that still exists.
In a strange way, I've got an anecdote to add to that as well, in terms of well, it really happened, but in not a dissimilar way, in terms of the whole inclusion agenda and age diversity, where maybe leadership is there in terms of maybe voice only or lip service only. I guess is better in terms of, as a leader, we must demonstrate that we have good values to inclusion, and we'll cover ourselves by having that one sentence in a policy statement somewhere, and age, the smallest three-letter word is in that sentence, so that's fine, we're okay. But unless that is disseminated throughout the organization, then people will not know it, won't value it, won't understand it, but hopefully will question it. And a situation, I was invited to talk at a global expo, diversity expo for an organisation, and unbeknown to me at the time, the chief exec was sitting third row and asked the question after I gave the presentation about, or it was almost a question statement of, you know, what great values as an organisation they had towards age diversity, and about 6 rows back, to the other half of the auditorium, some of it, I said, well, I'm employed here, and I don't see any of this, you know.
Oh dear.
But it sort of there was the good thing about that, it was taken in I think the right spirit that it was meant to be, that there needed to basically be a better connection of values, of core values, and a better connection of the opportunities for older people. And this individual was I think she said she was in her 60s, you know, early 60s, and but still wanted to work, had a lot of, you know, lot to offer, but that she didn't feel that inclusivity from the age perspective, whereas her own chief exec was sitting, you know, a number of yards away.
Saying we love you all, really, honestly.
So I guess one of the lessons there is know your audience.
Well, indeed, yeah. There is a link here back to the Deloitte piece of work around employee experience, I think, and I think it's interesting that, I mean, one of the things that they did is they use age as a sort of for the analysis, wasn't it? They were sort of like more, you know, the older workers, where it was showing they had a closer relationship with the organisation, they were more committed to it, they had more of a sense of purpose. And then the younger part of the organisation, which perhaps hadn't settled into the organisation yet, and that reflected in some of the engagement levels, etc. But I sort of challenge that thinking a little bit, because I think using age gets in the way of the analysis. And the reason I say that is I think there's 2 bits in terms of 2 key bits from an employee experience point of view, or 2 key dimensions. One is, what is your career stage? And by career stage, I don't mean age. I mean, because you could be starting, you know, a newish at 50. You could have made a career change, so you are early in that career, yeah. So that's like, if you like, an internal characteristic of your presence in the organisation. And then your life stage. So you could be 50, you could be early in career, and you might be an empty nester and have elderly parents, yeah, in terms of your life stage. So the way the organisation should be relating to you is very much recognising those factors to say, okay, we get it. You're early in career, and this is your externalities in terms of where you are in your personal life. Therefore, these are the key things we should be thinking about to give you a really good employee experience. It's not about how old you are, it's about where you are in your life. And I think there's another stage of the thinking around this.
That's so well articulated, Tony, because you're absolutely right. And in this day and age, well, it's been like this for a little while. You know, there's no jobs for life, you know, the I don't like the term, but portfolio careers is mentioned. You know, in terms of at least maybe having 2 or 3 different careers. I mean, maybe I'm an example of that as well, from my initial time in banking for 20 odd years in the City of London, to then going to a not-for-profit research organisation that was all about engineering and transport, to the position that I'm in now, and, you know, rallying the cause for age diversity in the workplace. And there's so many through that career and development of experience and know-how and technical understanding and competence in various things, to apply that in different ways. I think that's really valuable, and actually it comes out in discussion a lot with our champion partners. We want that to become better practice in the situations like Deloitte's identified, like recruitment, like the onboarding, like training and development and retention. Yeah, so consideration needs to be better instilled, as say, in behaviours and practice. And I think something else that I noticed, I wasn't sure it was a recommendation. I'm not sure how it's described in Deloitte, but they talked about attracting and retaining hard skills, but also soft skills. So, and I think some of those attributes that I talked about, those transferable attributes from different situations, and as you described, Tony, someone who's at the early stage of that part of career could be 21, could be 51, you know, or 61, you know. But it's part, but depending on where they are in their life and their life skills and what their life skills, what they bring, could potentially bring a different set of softer attributes, softer skills that really can add value to that role, to that to the company, to the business, that actually improves output and performance. So I think in some the age diversity forum is about multi-generations, but within the age discussion, we love to categorize people, you know, whether it's baby boomers or Gen X's or Gen Joneses or millennials, you know. But you so rightly say, Tony, it's about let's remove those barriers, because that's what they are, because they almost maybe in a unconscious, again, I don't really like unconscious. I think when people talk about unconscious bias, I think most bias is pretty conscious, to be honest. I think, but we need to, if we have a culture and behaviour and a practice that just gives everyone that fair and equitable opportunity about where they are in their career, whatever their age, you know, that's a way we can start breaking it down.
It's almost like, I mean, where I'd love to get to, whether we'd ever achieve it, I don't know. But the almost age is transparent. You don't see it. What you see is beyond that. It's, you know, is a human being that brings things to that particular organisation, that particular scenario. So you know, it's almost like we need to put, I don't know, a special pair of Google glasses on that makes us all look, you know, either 20 or 90, so that we don't see the age. What we see is the person. So it should be transparent, I think. You know, and again, that's a cultural. I mean, if you think, it's interesting, the cultural differences between, and this is very generic, but between East and West. You know, in the East, people who are further down in their, if you like, their life's journey are venerated because they come with life experience, and actually they're see, and I know this is changing, don't get me wrong, but historically, you know, if you were an elder, you were treated with veneration. And we in the West, we don't have the same, and it's not about right or wrong, it's just about different. And we have a different way of looking at these things. And I guess my argument is, wouldn't it be lovely if we didn't see that? And we just actually saw the person and all the things that the person brings to that particular set of circumstances. That would be just wonderful. So there we go. There's our objective. We have to get
that's a small goal. But you're so right, Tony.
You're the idiot. Come on.
Exactly. But you're so right, though, Tony. The age challenge is there's no geographic boundaries to this challenge, but also the opportunity and something else that we've been focusing on to help, remove those barriers and those stereotypes and that perception of thinking is about education. And the earlier we can showcase the values of a transparent age, as you describe, the better. I think Tony, we have a student placement working with us, Sadie. Not with us, Sadie, but she would normally be our editor-in-chief. And well, actually, I haven't been changing any of the captions, so I should at least put Tony, your name up there. So
look at that.
I've completely failed on the production value of the.
I'm just conscious that I think we've only got about 3 or 4 minutes left.
Yes.
Just something I wanted to just bring to the
Please do.
And I'm happy for people to disagree with me on this. Not an issue. But it goes back to this thing with the Deloitte report and employee experience. And without putting too fine a point on it, it almost sounds to me like we've put a label on something that we moved away from probably when I started my career, sort of 40 odd years ago, which was, and it's that dreadful word, organisations being paternalistic and looking after their employees. And I'm going, isn't this pretty much the same thing? We're looking at employee experience because we want to retain them. We want them to be more loyal. We want them to develop. We want them to be highly capable. And we want we want to develop them as real assets to the organisation and real advocates of the organisation. Whereas we lost that, or we started to lose that 40 odd years ago, because we moved into sort of a more, and it was all part of the time, free market. It was much more transactional. You went and worked for a company for a period of time. You had an exchange. Money in one direction and some stuff in the other direction, and then you moved on again. I know that sounds very cynical, but it's sort of. I mean, I lived through that. I saw it change in organisations where the relationship between employer and employee did become much more transactional, and I just feel like it's coming full circle, and people are waking up to the idea of being. I know they won't use the word because it has lots of other connotations, but there is an essence of being paternalistic. It's about giving the employee an experience where they feel safe, they feel that they're being looked after, they feel they're being developed, they're being appropriately rewarded. Sounds like being part of a family to me.
It sounds so fundamental, doesn't it, to what you would, as an individual, hope to receive when you enter the workplace. But as you say, what happened during that time? This is another conversation, Tony. I think, as you say, we're rapidly coming to the end. But I hope that, and maybe in some odd way, the pandemic has caused us to refocus our Google specs as well, in terms of those core values. And still a lot of work to be done. And I do just want to say, as we come to the end, thank you, Tony, for discussion today, as ever, thought-provoking and challenging. And we've got more questions to answer, so I dearly hope to see you again on as a guest here. But as we do challenge the age diversity in the workplace, we look to celebrate that as well. And on June 11th, let's see if I can, there you go. We have Champion Age Diversity Day, and it's an opportunity for organisations to absolutely showcase those, maybe, those more fundamental values that you were just describing, Tony, at least on that day. But we hope, beyond just the day. And we invite organisations to, join us, to commit to those behaviours and cultures that do remove the barriers. And just, I do want to say just very quickly, we've got a couple of live sessions on that day, and one of them is with Tony. You introduced me to a book, The 100-Year Life. We had one of the co-authors, Professor Andrew Scott, given a presentation, and I think a lot of his from the London Business School, where he's a professor, and I think a lot of his work around aging in society and how that how the workplace entwines with that. I think there's going to be a lot of crossover with what you were describing, Tony. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Anybody who's listening now, I would highly recommend joining for that. Just even if you're going to join for that session, that will be absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, you know, we're over the moon. Our champion partner Elsevier have arranged that for us through the Lancet, who are also, you know, part of that, so which is excellent. And we've got a panel discussion following Professor Andrew Scott's presentation to respond to it, basically. So, and we'll be announcing that all, I think, the middle of next week in terms of the timetable and who's on it. But yes, thank you for that plug, Tony. Yes, but yes, we would love people to you know, to join in on that. We're just over time. So once again, Tony, huge thank you. Really appreciate your insight and input, and thank you to everyone who's watched today or we'll catch up on this on our YouTube channel, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Bye for now.
Take care, everybody.